Brian, tell me about the acquisition.
Thanks for asking. Really excited. Prior to sitting down with you here, we are about to ink a deal, but it's done to acquire a firm out on Long Island. I'm based out of Westchester, New York, and New York City. And about a year ago, I had run into a colleague. I hadn't seen her in a long time at an event. We were just kind of chit-chatting, and somehow it came up, and I jokingly said, well, when you're ready to retire, let me know. And I got a phone.
Like off the cuff?
Off the cuff. Like, she told me she had just turned 60, and I was like, what are you kidding me? Yeah. You didn't just turn 60, and we were talking, and I kind of off the cuff said it. And she called me shortly after that and said, were you serious? I said, let's have coffee. And it took a little bit of time, and I think it was more, I was ready for it. I've haven't quite done an acquisition before. I was going into partnership with somebody previously who unfortunately had passed away, but with this individual, she has a firm. She's a solo practice, had a couple like per diem attorneys working for her, a bunch of employees, had done very well for herself over the years, and 2 areas, workers' compensation, Social Security, and I was really looking for something in Social Security, and that's her real forte and specialty. And we started talking, and we were able to come to terms, and she'll be basically doing almost an earn-out, working for a period of time, and we'll be acquiring the name, acquiring clients. Well, they have to sign up with us type of thing, but they're really her clients, and it's really exciting.
What's the process been like from like an emotional standpoint?
It's an interesting emotional process, and for me it's interesting because my history. So real quick, and I tell this, my kids hate this story. I say it too much, but basically back in law school, and I just got my 30th anniversary from the New York State Bar.
Whoa.
The New York State Bar said being an attorney.
That's a big number.
So I was like 30. And so I was in law school working for literally a Court Street attorney, hated the guy, and I quit one day. And I'm out to dinner with my in-laws, and I'm telling my father-in-law, he says, come work for me while you look for a job. And the joke is I'm still looking for a job. So I started out in a family practice. So I learned a lot right away. Within, so 1995. So, by 2003, he was retiring. In fact, he had another partner. He was trying to set up a deal with me and the other partner. He ended up suing the other partner, kicking him out. So my first experience with having a partner was a lawsuit.
Wow.
So my only partner after that was my father-in-law, and I'm like, I'm never doing this crap again. With a partner. So for years, I've had different joint ventures and tried to do things. So this one was a little, second guessing myself. Do I really want to do this? How can I have more control? I like to be very fair, but at the same time, it's like I need to have some control. I had also mentioned I had a partner, or a to-be partner, who had passed away about 4 years ago, and we were just in the process of merging our practices. He had no employees, but had a big marketing background as an attorney. So this is the first one where I'm really bringing in some employees. We're bringing in a caseload, more workers' compensation and a lot of Social Security cases, with the focus being to develop our Social Security practice. And so I did a few things different this time. It took a little bit of time, but I also finally said to myself, enough is enough. Let's really start talking terms. I also hired an attorney. So I have a business attorney. Had great guys over the years, but I don't know if you've ever dealt with this. Like in New York, these guys are just kind of old school. Yeah. Here's how you do it, this and that. And I never felt they had that kind of entrepreneurial business mind.
Sure.
They knew all the details. But I would call this attorney up and be like, I'm thinking about doing this in New Jersey. Oh, well, can you do that? Well, that's why I'm asking you.
Yeah, that's why I'm calling you. Yeah, exactly.
I'm paying you $600 an hour. So I ended up actually finding I will call her a fractional general counsel. She comes out of the general counsel world. She has a solo practice, and she advertises herself as basically like a fractional CFO or fractional general counsel.
So when you said you hired an attorney, you weren't talking about just you hired an attorney for this temporary thing. You hired a fractional attorney that could go on as long as she does a great job for forever.
So yeah, let me be clear. So I have the practice I'm acquiring. That attorney is coming and is going to be working for us.
Sure, yeah.
But I hired a attorney, and it was on a project basis, but I gave her a retainer, and before we even got this deal done, I had a couple little things that had to be done. I said, why am I doing it? And this was over the Christmas break.
Yeah.
And I felt kind of bad. I said, I feel so bad, but I'm getting pressure from this person, and we just got to kind of wrap this thing up. And she responded, not a problem. I'm working a couple hours a day, even though I'm away, this and that. The next morning I wake up, in my inbox, I had this little agreement and her analysis of the little agreement, and I got it all signed off, got it all taken care of before the end of the year. I said, wow, having a real general counsel available is huge.
Yeah.
And it's a mistake I've made in the past where I try to negotiate or do things, and that's not what I do. It's not what you do. I can read a contract, I can read a will, I can do certain things, but in my business, I need that outside input. And the really cool thing was, her name's Haley. One of the things that she did was, in this other agreement I had shared space with somebody, and we were, getting rid of the company we had created to share the space.
Gotcha.
We separated.
Smart move, by the way.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. I guess I can say this. So I out-Trump Trump, and this is not political. So basically, we had this huge space.
Huge.
And I shared it with this other person.
It's the biggest space you've ever seen. Bigger than any space.
Huge. Oh, man. You're killing me here. And we went our separate ways around COVID, and what we ended up doing was we built a wall. But he took some extra space. So we built a wall. He took some of my extra space. I renegotiated my side of the lease. I found out he never renegotiated his side.
Oh, no. Yeah.
So built a wall, and the other guy paid for it. So
not too bad.
Yeah.
It's a good deal.
So, but the point is, we had we wanted an agreement and be done with it. And it was really nice to get a red line copy back where she said, you need these 2 things, and these other 4 things just depends on how much you really want to fight it. It's not a big deal. So we ended up at a great compromise, got this thing done. So I'm using her for the term sheet, the asset, and any ethical issues surrounding this. And I'm excited because it's working out well. And I think in the future, a lot of things. Oh, I'm going to go into an agreement with this attorney. Sorry about that. I'm not supposed to knock this. And it's great to have on board, and it's worth every penny because you don't want to spend your time just...
Yeah, I've never considered bringing on some sort of fractional legal counsel. I think that's awesome. By the way, it's okay to talk with your hands too. We were talking about that. It's better actually. It makes you more likable. There's lots of studies on this. But what is it like negotiating with someone that you are bringing into the fold? That can be tricky.
Yeah, I mentioned before, you want to be. There's a control issue, right?
Sure,
you want to have control, and rightly so, especially after 30 years of this. I realize,
and they don't want to be controlled.
Most people don't want to be controlled.
Yep.
And you don't actually know what the other person really wants.
Mm-hmm.
And this was an arm's length transaction compared to in the past, Mike, my buddy who had passed away, over time, he was a consultant for us for years through our business coach. And then we decided, we became friends, and then we're working together. I've had other people who I knew as friends and tried to bring in, it just doesn't work. I think Chris Nicolasian talked about that in his podcast episode. And this was an arm's length transaction. So part of me was trying to figure out, I know what I want. And I want to be tough negotiating, but at the same time, I don't want to lose the opportunity, even though I know other opportunities will come along. And I think overall, looking at it, there are a couple pieces I probably could have been a little tougher on, and I think I did pretty well with some other pieces. And now it's kind of putting the screws to it, or whatever they say.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting because like my guess is that you probably could have gotten a better deal. She probably could have gotten a better deal. But if you go too far in this arrangement, then it just all blows up, because there is the part where there's the earn off and you got to work together. And if she pushes too hard or you push too hard, there's going to be a lot of resentment there that's not going to make that relationship work very well.
Yeah, I think one of the important things is to also try to see it from their perspective. And I said to her one time during the negotiation, I said, look, you have built an incredibly successful business. One of her things is she just didn't want to deal with the business aspect of it anymore. It was really making her nuts. She loves working with clients. That's fine. That's her thing. But by any measurement, super successful, right? She's, had a building. She built and bought a bigger building, right? And she has this whole practice going, and she's done very well for herself. And as a woman in this business, I mean,
in New York,
tremendous. In New York, tremendous. And I don't want to just say, come work for me, and all of a sudden all that disappears, right? And I don't know what type of necessarily ego or thoughts of the person she would have or was having about that, right? Because again, it's somewhat of an arm's length transaction, and we were doing our due diligence. We went through the kind of the technical side. How many cases do you have? What's the average length? A whole bunch of let's look at your contracts. Didn't know of any liabilities. We were going through a whole bunch of punch list items. Yeah. But it was more trying to figure out, we've never really worked together, so that's going to be a general challenge as well, right? You're going from being your own boss to now working for somebody.
Sure.
And I said that to her outright at one point. I said, you don't have to give me an answer now, but how do you feel about that? Think about it, because this is real.
I asked someone earlier today, they had acquired a firm and they would not recommend doing it. But I've always viewed acquiring firms as, because they seem to have a bad experience with it, right? But I've always seemed to thought of it as like a really good way of growing, where you can work out these agreements with these. Maybe the attorney wants to leave the practice, maybe they want to retire, maybe they just don't want to run the firm anymore. I do think there's a really good opportunity to acquire firms and be really creative with it. And so have you thought of this maybe as a way of growing in other ways?
I jokingly said, my COO, Kathy, I jokingly said to her, I said, I know the ink's not dry yet, but who should we go after next? But in all seriousness, we have a very specific growth plan for this year and for the future, and we spend a lot of time and money marketing, trying to get organic growth, trying to do all the different things that we do. And this was the first time where, if I looked at the numbers, if we would take in as many signed cases as we did last year, and then I add these cases that are coming in, I've hit my numbers, my growth numbers. So what I've challenged my chief growth officer, my marketing director, to do is, we know we have these cases coming in, but let's not consider those as part of our core number for the moment. Let's see what we can do. Can we hit the goals that we set based on what we're doing? Because if we do that, now all of a sudden, instead of having our 20% growth, we're going to have 35% growth.
Yeah.
In terms of the cases. So it's an interesting way to look at it, and I do think that acquisition's an interesting thing in our field. I have a great team that's helping me with this. In fact, I had done something like this, bringing a very senior attorney in to help grow the business and do this certain part of the business, and basically made a very quick decision. Within a year, I ended the relationship. In fact, we still have a really good relationship, and we refer him a bunch of certain types of cases.
Interesting.
But internally, such a non-fit. And I promised my team that I would always be the ultimate decision maker, but I am not going to, ram something down their throat. And so they were very involved in this process as well, meeting, the individual and her employees and saying, wow, this is somebody, I think, we can really work with. But the challenge, like any other challenge with a merger acquisition is, you're bringing two cultures together.
Yeah.
Here, it's a much smaller culture. So I think we can really monitor and pay attention to it. I don't know what the other, their acquisition deal was, but I'll have to listen to the podcast. But
stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned. But it is a challenge. Because again, you make a lot of assumptions, and that goes back to you want to plan for as much as possible, but not over plan and sink the deal.
Sure.
So there's a fine balance there.
Yeah. Did you get the teams together before you put the deal together and everything, just to see if it was a good fit?
Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, I since she's coming in specifically to my Social Security practice and really is going to be leading the charge there. So I had my whole team come in. She came in for the day. And even though I kind of led the initial meeting, I found some good excuses to get up and leave like constantly.
Nice.
And I let the team just hang out all day. And then I had lunch with her, and I got some great feedback. And then they spent the afternoon doing stuff. And then the next day I met with the team and got the feedback from them. So
it's a clever way of doing it, so that they don't know you're doing it on purpose. Just I gotta make a phone call real quick.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Even though I make this whole thing about you shouldn't have your phone when you're in a meeting. But
Absolutely, yeah. But, I mean, you gotta I do think it's important that way they're in like this natural environment with each other. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, they don't have to love each other or anything like that, but in particular, they're going to be working together.
Yeah.
I can't. The last time I had done something like this, I just assumed way too much. Right? I got sold a good bill of goods, as they say, and I believed it all. And by the time it started going, it was too late. So this time around, it's been different.
So I do want to talk to you about your, I guess, would you call it like an almost partnership? With your partner, because I think you've always called him your partner, but you never formalized an agreement, is that right?
So I own the practice 100%.
Okay.
I do have a senior attorney who I call a partner, who's a contract attorney.
Okay.
A contract partner, for better lack of a word. And that's a combination of whatever his salary is, plus some incentive plans around things to try to encourage him to either be a rainmaker or to, look out for what's going on.
Well, and I'm talking about your friend that ended up passing away.
Oh,
was he ever formally your partner?
Technically, no. So what happened was, believe it or not, we were going to this Maximum Lawyer event in St. Louis in May of 2019.
Yeah.
And literally the day before, he called me and said he got these bad test results back and he has to go for more testing. So he didn't come to that event. Yeah. And that's when he got diagnosed with cancer. And what we had been doing was, again, he had this practice and we had already started what we would call our term sheet. Hey, what are the terms? How are we going to share? You have all these cases out there. I have all this stuff. And we had we had done a whole bunch of stuff around, and we started having an attorney get involved about, buy-in over a few years was, he was a mass tort guy. He generated, marketed cases and just gave them all out. So I was going to start sharing in things that existed prior to me coming in over the course of a few years. And then he was going to share in certain things. And so we were coming to terms. Then he got really sick, and it kind of morphed more into what does it look like when I pass? So there was a buyout for his widow. So I technically own the firm. It's a Pennsylvania firm. I own the firm. I own the web. It's really the website assets and the clients that were in existence at the time.
So you did end up buying that part of the firm then, I guess.
Yeah.
What was that like going through knowing what was going to be the likely outcome? That
sucked.
It's got to be, it sounds awful.
It sucked on so many levels.
Yeah.
And, there was the emotional side for me of, fuck, I finally got a guy who was like, my brother from another mother. I mean, literally, I'm from Philadelphia originally. He's from Philly. He was maybe 5-6 years older than I am. And, we had some people in the same circle.
Yeah.
But there was a common connection there. And there's just a lot about why I knew that partnership could work because of how we got involved into it, as he was a consultant originally, and then we grew closer together and understood how we worked, came up with these plans. He was a crazy planner. I mean, beyond brilliant with numbers. Like, he introduced me, my marketing director, and a couple other team members to ways of looking at data.
Yeah.
Years ago.
You've always been good on data too.
That I have never, thank you.
Yeah.
Ways of looking at data that have just we still use today. It's such easy things. Like, he was this genius with throughput. Did you ever read what is Goldschmidt's?
No.
Oh, what was the book? Oh my God, the theories of the constraint theory.
Okay.
Theories of constraint. Basically, you identify in any process where the constraint is, you work on it, then another one will pop up, and it's all about throughput. How quickly do you get the widget through the system?
Okay. And
he was just a genius with that stuff, and so it's scribbling notes like mad and crazy. It's like when he was getting more and more sick, he would be sending me images of all his notebooks. And I'm just like looking at his notebooks going, who thinks this way?
Yeah.
So, and so it was tough because you had somebody that really complimented you, and that happens. And
so was he doing this to pass it on to you so you had the information?
No, he just always done stuff like that.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, he made sure he passed it on. And it was funny because, again, he was really good with certain things. I was really good with other things. And, post his passing, as things settled down and then we got stuff worked out with his widow and what we're going to do with the different things, we realized that we had forgotten a bunch of things. Because we didn't have the attorney, we didn't have an attorney help us finalize certain things. It all worked out because we were all friends and we were able to make it work out. But
all of the cases, I'm guessing the way it worked is, after his passing, there's a certain amount of money. I guess, was it just you buy out and it's over, or were there cases that you had together that she ended up getting paid out on?
So the way we structured it was, she was on our payroll for 3 years, and now we're 4 years. There was a buyout. There was a buy-in and a buyout, right? So what happened was Mike was originally bringing in a huge backlog of cases plus potential future cases.
Yeah.
And he was helping us build the attraction mechanism for our future cases. So there was a salary for him, and then we were doing a fee share, and then we had this kind of funky fee share where in the first couple of years he got more from his cases, but eventually they evened out and we were 50-50 partners. Sure. So when he passed away, the deal was we did a buyout to his widow, employee, healthcare, stuff like that, and then there was a small value for the firm, which was an annual payment based on the website. And then for the cases that were in existence at the time that he passed, we had a deal in terms of how they were split up.
Gotcha.
So
was he like a friend? Was he like a best friend? Was he like a friend? Because I do wonder like how close of the relationship, how close of friends you really were. And the reason why I'm asking, I'm not saying you're not friends. And whether or not you think like having a partnership with like a best friend is a very good idea, or having like a friend, but not necessarily like a best friend.
Yeah, Mike and I were good friends.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say best friends, right? We had just really met.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe 2015.
Wow.
And so we had become very close from working together. A lot of shared values, things like that. So, somewhere between a friend and a best friend, we definitely understood each other. We had our moments too, but we were able to talk about it and stuff like that. So coming into it was different than had I gone in with a good friend right out of
Sure.
law school or something like that.
I do wonder, like, do you think it is a good idea to go into a partnership with a best friend? Because I feel like that would be really tough if you didn't work out.
Yeah. Having seen best friends break up,
Mm-hmm.
I think it comes back to the toughest thing for anything is having those conversations beforehand.
Yeah.
I always call it, let's just do it and we'll stick it in the drawer, right? It kind of sounds a little, not quaint, but like, oh yeah, okay, but at the same time, having had a agreement with a friend, sharing space with the idea that we're going into business together, then realizing we weren't going into business, but we were still sharing space, and then we had to break that up. Planning it out way ahead of time is, hey, in case this doesn't work, while we can't cover all contingencies and we don't necessarily want to, here's what we want to do for the most part. It's almost like a prenuptial, right?
Sure.
You want to talk about maybe what you're going to do with kids, what you're going to do with the house, or things like that. And you don't want to talk about it. You don't want to think about it.
No.
But that's why there's a lot of attorneys in business, because people get divorced, and a business divorce is no different.
Do you think it was an advantage, the fact, this is such a weird question to ask, but do you think there was an advantage to crafting up an agreement knowing that he was going to pass, or having a really good indication that he was going to pass, because it forced you to think about all of those things?
Yes. We started the agreement before we knew he was sick.
Right.
We put it on hold for a little while, and then we were like, okay, we really got to do something. What I wish we had done is I kind of wish I had a general counsel.
Sure. Okay.
Like back then, because I could have said, what are the things, here's what we want. Here's our business terms.
Yeah.
But what are the things we're not thinking about? Because a few of those things popped up.
Like what?
Excuse me. There was a discrepancy, for instance, between what we agreed to pay his widow period of time and the period of time we were paying for medical. Didn't even realize it.
Oh, wow.
We took care of it all.
I was going to say, knowing you,
it was a non-issue, but it was still an issue. It's like it was an unnecessary issue, because I would have expected a general counsel to say, this is fine, but did you mean to do this? And if we meant to do it, that's one thing. If we didn't mean to do it, it's like, oops, no, sorry. I really think that, unfortunately, right, death has a way to give some clarity. I read my daily Stoic every day. I listen to a lot of my podcasts and really, think about it, right? They say memento mori, right? We're all mortal. And some people more than others really don't like to talk about it or think about it, but you have to. And as I see why as you get older, you don't put up with shit from people. Yeah. My wife and I won't get into it at all, but we have a few things where sometimes even our kids are like, I can't believe you guys are like that. We're like, no toxicity in our life. Sorry, guys.
I was going to say, do we need to clip this next section and send it to your wife to see if what are you going to say after these words? I was really curious to hear what you were going to say. The last thing about the acquisition.
Yeah.
Having gone through what you went through, and being forced to think about some things you really didn't want to think about, did that help you in crafting this acquisition agreement?
Yes.
Yeah. Or I was wondering if maybe you just kind of like, buried the old thing, didn't want to think about it anymore, which some people do, or if it did help you.
No, in fact, I think it slowed me down a little bit because I kept thinking of more things.
Oh, interesting.
And that's where it's the paralysis by analysis. You don't want to overdo it, but then also you don't want to underdo it.
Right.
And I'm actually waiting for the final. So we basically had come up with a term sheet, and I gave it to my general counsel, and I said, by the way, here's some other things I've thought about that weren't part of the agreement, but do we have to address or not? Things like, the bank account and what happens with, we have receivables. Well, when do the receivables become my receivables versus her there's a lot of, little nuance, and it's not a deal breaker. But these are things that even in the kind of negotiation, we didn't necessarily talk about because it wasn't I have a neighbor, a business neighbor on my floor, really, really nice guy, and he does some type of online educational training type of stuff. And he's been trying to sell his business now for a little over a year. And we were always talking business stuff. And he was doing his due diligence, and he was like fascinated because they hired a broker and all this stuff they were going through, and then they put out the RFPs, and they had two people come and do their due diligence, and they got like this close to an agreement, and it fell through. Oh. And he was like, "Oh my God!" I was like, "Hang in there." So he's now in his second round of doing it, but in listening to all the kind of checklist items that he's going through, it got me thinking too. It's like, well, I'd be an idiot not to do it.
Sure.
Right? You do yourself no favors by just assuming or over trusting. This is business. It's embarrassing as anything, but I will tell a quick little story. So I had a quote unquote friend who for about 10 years sold me my copy machines.
Oh, no. Okay.
At least me, my copy machines.
Okay.
Let's just say after he absconded with about $100,000 from a deal that he cut for me and other people's money to Las Vegas and started his little shenanigans out there, got some of the money back, but I had to deal with two different leasing companies, and when I peeled everything back, that SOB, lied to my face. Like, I played hockey with this guy.
Wow.
Right? Lied to my face, and I got taken because I was unfortunately too trusting. And there is nothing wrong from the business perspective being a bit of a hard ass about contract terms. Right. Some stuff. The worst thing that somebody says is, "No, this is our contract. Take it or leave it." Okay, right? There's company, right? The phone company, some other things. You're not negotiating crap with them, but you can always ask.
100%.
But what I learned, in that particular lesson, like seriously, you don't have to go overboard. But at the same time, I want to make sure when the final papers are signed that I am certainly covered and protected. And if the things work out in the way that they're supposed to work out, then everybody's going to be super happy.
Yeah, the people that are going to do that are going to be the ones that look you in the eye and they shake your hand and they're preying on your trust is what they're doing. Yeah. But the ones that are going to respect you the most and not do that are going to be the ones that are going to understand when you don't want to do that deal, right? Like this isn't going to work out for me. But the ones that really they're going to take advantage of you are the ones that are going to prey on you trusting them.
I'm glad you said that. I recently tested a bunch of different AI systems, for like some medical chronology stuff, and every single one of them was, hey, you sign up, but you get a 21-day trial, a 7-day trial, whatever it was. And we really tested them, and we picked one.
Yeah. And
then I told the other guy, sorry, we're done. And one of the guys said, well, could you tell me, why, what about it, and he was so happy. I was just honest and straightforward with him. And that's what it is.
Yeah.
And That's business. If somebody gets all upset, then you know what? Better be scratching your head going, wait, what's going on here?
Who'd you go with?
Right now we're using a thing called superinsight.ai.
Okay.
Interesting. The fellow who created it, from everything I can tell, is a disabled veteran. And he created this to analyze VA disability cases because you can do different reports. The VA disability report, Social Security disability report, and a PI report.
What a beautiful idea.
And it's tremendous because for our purposes, again, we don't need what the PI stuff is offering. We need basically the medical chronology, but there are certain things within Social Security, for instance, the listings, the impairments, and it's grouped that way. And my attorney who was testing it, she said to me, "Oh my God, I was in the hearing, the judge was giving me a hard time, and I just searched the document, and boom, boom, boom. I said, Judge, page 37, page 295, and we won the case."
Fantastic!
She goes, "It was so easy." As opposed to looking at the judge's file and scrolling through and doing that. So, the generative AI stuff like that is going to be more and more.
Oh yeah,
super helpful.
Just wait till you hear the interview with Kane Elliott. We talk about some cool things. He's got some good insights on it. Tell me about, you mentioned this. I didn't know this story. I don't know anything about the story. Tell me about the time you quit. When you left that firm, you mentioned you quit your job. Like what was that story?
Okay. So I went to school, Brooklyn Law School, and Brooklyn Law School is on the excuse me, is on the corner of Jerome Street and Court Street. Court Street because that's where all the courts are in Brooklyn. I worked for this PI firm, and I'll say the guy's name, Sandy Rubenstein. It was Rubenstein and Flato. The reason I say the name is Sandy Rubenstein. If you follow the New York Post or any New York stuff, particularly from the 90s and the early 2000s, was like best buddies with Al Sharpton. He had cornered the Haitian cab driver market.
Oh, no.
So I worked in this absolute pit of a law firm while I was in law school.
Yeah.
And I had been there for about 2 years.
Cab drivers are some of the toughest people to deal with.
But he just was a high volume. Yeah. It was a disgusting office. It was all paper back in the day, obviously, but it was craziness. One day, and I'd been there for about 2 years, and he had long hair, and he talked like this, and he has his suspenders and stuff. And I'd been there for like 2 years doing all this work, learning a bunch of stuff in law school, and he comes out one day and looks and goes, "You, sharpen this," hands me a pencil.
You're a lawyer.
I wasn't a lawyer at this point. I sharpened the pencil, I give it to him, and I walk into Jay, his partner at the time, Jay's office. I go, "Jay, I quit." And I walked out. and that was the story. And I mean, the guy's, his practice is still going.
Wow, how old is he now?
Well, I don't think he practices too much. His other partner is still doing it. But man, I'll tell you, that actually turned me off from PI work.
Really?
Yeah. Then I was talking to my father-in-law, and he does workers' comp, and I brought the Social Security into the practice, and
definitely it's different. Like PI, the people you deal with PIs are different than the people you deal with like comp or disability. It's just different. Yeah. We're built differently. It's just how it is.
Oh, listen, my oldest is a PI attorney now. He's actually working for a friend of mine. He's doing a great job, learning a ton. I had a tear in my eye. I went to his first trial.
Oh, nice. But that was fun.
Oh, it was a blast. The opening statements are great. I'm like looking at the jury, trying to see how they're, gauging him. And proud papa moment. So it was in Rockland County, which is a very defense-oriented county. So he ended up with not only a plaintiff's verdict, but he absolutely slammed them. They got $1.5 million.
Had a baby. That was his first.
His first.
Whoa, nice.
His partner in his firm second seeded it and did a lot of the motion work, but he was up there cross-examining, doing all the stuff. It was awesome.
Oh, he's happy.
But I'll tell you, it was really funny. So we're waiting for the verdict. So we go to the pub across the street, right? We sit down. And everybody gets beers, orders some food, and all of a sudden the phone buzzes. I guess the jury came in and had some questions.
Yeah.
So they all got up and ran back, and I go, I guess I'm paying for drinks.
I guess so. Absolutely. You know what? If you're going to be over there with them, that's the least you could do. You know, you get to be along for the ride.
Yeah,
that's awesome. At what point did you brand to the disability guys?
I would say that has to go back to around 2010.
Well, that was early on. I was earlier than
10 to 12. And our original logo was, this is another real good point for anybody listening from a pure marketing perspective. If a marketing person is selling you an idea, even if it's the greatest idea in the world, sit on it. So I had this woman who created this great logo, and it was these magnifying glasses, and one of my partners, he plays a clarinet, so it had a clarinet, and it was like really cool, because you look into things really closely, right? Mm-hmm. Sold a great thing. Nobody ever understood what the hell the logo was.
Right.
And it was the most complicated logo to get onto shirts, so then we morphed into Pep Boys, Manny, Mo, and Jack.
Yeah.
So I always thought of the disability guys, the Pep Boys. Like, that's my idea, was always just like faces.
Yeah.
And then we ended up with the most recent, we're probably a good 5-6 years into the most recent logo, which is, we call him Ted. I don't know why, but he's Ted, our little guy who's a construction worker with the broken arm. And,
yeah, I'm actually trying to visualize the Pep Boys. Are they similar in like character design and all that?
No, Manny, Mo, and Jack. They were just these like
I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
black outlined faces.
Yeah,
like 3 faces. Originally, we thought, we would just have faces, and it kind of morphed into.
So, what do you call your guy on yours?
Ted.
Ted. Why Ted?
I have no idea.
No idea?
And the really funny part is, so like, in FileVine, we have a test project called TED Test. Yeah.
TED Test.
We just refer to him as Ted.
I like it. So there's a couple things I think of whenever I think of you. I think of numbers, which is interesting because you're talking about your partner, I'll call him your partner, as like being so big on numbers. But there's that part. I think of you as like branding, but also like processes. I feel like you're good at all of those things. Do you feel like you're good at all those things?
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I know that I'm good at them, but I don't feel all the time that I'm good at them. And I think, I've heard you talk about this too, right? Because you can always improve your processes.
Always, yeah.
You're always trying. And sometimes you have to take that moment, take a deep breath, and then you look around like, listen, I'm acquiring a law firm. There are processes there.
Yeah.
But the gap between my processes and those processes is pretty significant with certain things. And nothing negative about it. It's just that I like to, and I've said this for years, here we are in Arizona, and right, you can have a non-attorney ownership of a law firm. I've been trying to build this business now for at least the last 5 years as a business so that when the time does come, I can be acquired if I want to. Right? Yeah. Because what's going to happen is, I'm sure there's some phenomenal lawyers and phenomenal firms, but when you take that to private equity or venture capital or whomever is investing, they're going to say, well, it's just your name and the cases, here's the value. Oh, but I want much more. Why?
Right.
You don't have a brand. You don't have processes in place. Right? I want to be able to say, it's old fashioned, but say, hey, here's my 3-ring binder of how we do this. Here's how we do this.
Right.
And it makes for such a different type of stress and decreased stress level. The end of the year comes around, it's usually pretty super duper stressful for law firm business owners. There's stress there at the end of the year, but it's so different than what it was just a few years ago. We have so many things in place now. Yeah. Right? We brought on board a fractional CFO. We've had an online bookkeeping and accounting service for years now. We have our IT. Things are together. Like right now, people are scrambling to do 1099s.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, our people are doing them, and they say, "Oh, what about this, and this?" And we look and say, "Okay, do this, and this." And
yeah, there should be someone doing that for you. Like that's
hands down.
What is the thing, if you look back at like 3 years ago, because it's nice. Like I can be at the office now. We were closed, the end of the year, which was great. Luckily I can do it now without a bunch of stress. But like, what is the thing that you can think of that's reduced the most stress for you over the last few years?
getting the fiscal house in order, particularly the processes and the systems.
Okay.
That hands down, right? It doesn't take away the need to have to make the donuts, right? Get the cases in, crank those cases out. But knowing what's going on and getting even more insight into it now, right? Oh my God, numbers are down. Is it panic time or is it, what's going on?
Right.
And there's much more the, not happy with this. Let's figure out what's happening and being able to figure out that. That's probably been the biggest boon to us. Second would be getting the systems for the actual legal work. It's always sharpening this, right? Always. And then the biggest challenge we have right now, and it's everybody does, it's people.
People's a tough one. Let's table that for a second.
Okay.
I want to come back to the people part of it. You've got a dashboard, right?
Yes.
And what is on your dashboard? Like, what are the numbers that you're looking at?
So, the main numbers that we look at is we have a annual revenue goal, and we look at it as annual revenue goal, current revenue, and the percentage against where we should be for the year. We have a signed case goal. So it's the revenue, it's the sign. We have two revenue goals because we have a core business, and then since I refer a lot of cases out, and you PI attorneys are nice enough to send me checks. What we do is we take a portion of that and we attribute that to the business that everyone can kind of share in our incentive plan.
Right.
But we don't control that other than we know what the average is for the last few years. The new cases we measure, actually fiscally, we measure burn rate, how quickly we're burning through money. I watch our debt to equity ratio and our quick ratio, which is really the, if we closed up shop today is, do we have enough liquidity to pay all our bills? And so that tells us if we're saving money, building money, things
You're
like
the
that.
first lawyer I've talked to that has talked about that. That's interesting. The burn rate too. I know some other, like Kevin Chaney. I think he focuses on burn rate too. But it's almost like you are operating it kind of like a startup, which is interesting.
It's funny. I'm at a business that is now 92 years old. Right? So,
I'm aware.
So 2023 is our 100th anniversary. We're taking suggestions for what type of big ass party we should have.
So and I do have that in the notes about being a 90-year-old law firm, and like that's one of your proudest moments is like getting it into the 21st century.
Yeah.
Not moments, but accomplishments. Like, how is it 90 years old? Like, who owned it before your father-in-law?
All right, so my stepfather-in-law, just to be clear.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
The stepfather-in-law.
Yeah, so my wife's stepfather. So it was his father originally. So yes, his name is Abraham.
Okay.
So Abraham founded the firm. Abraham and Ruth. Very biblical firm.
Fun fact, my dad wanted to name me Abraham, and my mom said, no freaking way.
So you ended up with Tyson?
I ended up with, Ross Tyson, yes. Okay. Drastically different names.
So Abraham founded the firm in 1933. So we do I did a behind the scenes at Disney years ago when I was in a non-lawyer marketing group. And I suggest anybody, if you do it, you go down to Disney and maybe we'll do it.
I've heard it's amazing. It's a great idea. Yeah.
Unbelievable. Really is an amazing thing. And they talked about traditions, and they really pump up new people about the traditions and so it really got me thinking. And I do a traditions presentation, and I try to do it live for all of our onboarding. And I have the original case book from 1933. And
you're kidding.
The handwriting is Ruth Markoff, who died in 1985, because I have stuff from her all the way into the 80s. And there's a really cool connection there. So they founded this firm back in the 30s, and by the 50s, they were doing really, really well. I think they even, at one point, they had a PI component. They had a bunch of stuff. The building I started practicing in 401 Broadway, just south of Canal Street, they had an opportunity in the 50s to buy the building. Now, it was a lot of money back then, like $25,000.
What's it worth now?
Let's just say I probably wouldn't be sitting here.
Yeah, I bet.
Or I would be sitting here talking about different things. And then my father-in-law got involved, and his father passed away fairly young in like 1970. He took over with a bunch of partners, and then by the time I came in the 90s, they were really focused just on the workers' comp. In fact, this is how kind of the life cycle of things. So that's why I like the idea, that you said I kind of look at like a startup, right? Because this guy Adzies does this whole thing about the life cycle of businesses. It's a bell curve, and they get ossified and they die out, and whatever it is, and you're always trying to kind of stay right there in the prime. And by the time I came in, they only did workers' comp. They were renting to a Social Security attorney who taught me stuff. And we had always and I was like, why don't we do Social Security as well? Why is he renting from us? Because one of the partners got mad that he was taking cases from other like comp attorneys.
Oh, geez.
And
competition.
They were charging him, it wasn't a lot of money, but comparatively, they were charging him so much money, he was basically like paying the rent for this office space.
Wow.
And I'm like, that was so small-minded.
Very, very small-minded.
Because after so that partner leaves, and my father-in-law retires, and 9/11, or he retired after 9/11, but 9/11 happens, and we did the smart thing and we moved further downtown. There were a lot of incentives, but when we moved, this attorney wouldn't move with us, and so that's really when we started getting into the Social Security piece. But coming back to what you're asking is, all these years, I kind of came in, I got an amazing education as a young attorney, real behind the scenes stuff from my father-in-law.
Yeah.
Really, really behind the scenes stuff. So I knew a lot more by the time I was 30 than most guys and gals would know before they're like 40, 45 in terms of how the business is run and working your way up through it. And then in 2007, I moved. We were downtown, and I was like, I have 4 young kids. Like, what am I doing? And the quick story was, I had a friend who had a building up in White Plains, and I just subleased my space, moved up to White Plains. The next year was the crash. Thank God I had a sublease, and I was out of there. And the rest is history. But it was at that point that I started getting involved in really marketing, trying to get more cases, and beginning to look at this as a business. And what it's like. So I try to treat it like it's a startup, and getting to that more mature level, because you don't want to grow too fast, but you don't want to grow too small. Right. I've been through it. I've grown fast where, oh my God, we're doing so well, and I was throwing money everywhere, and then like the next year my accountant says this and this. I'm like, what's going on? I'm paying my father-in-law off, and I wasn't taking a salary.
Wow,
stuff like that. Stuff like that over the years, and I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. So that's where, definitely by about 2010, we were like, okay, what's going on here? But there's a lot of good DNA, and we're still dealing with what I call a lot of kind of mutated bad DNA.
Like what?
Just little ways things. People think sometimes in terms of how they handle things, even though we have certain processes in place. I have a lot of employees that have been with us a long time, so they, learned from the old team.
Well, so this is a good segue into circling back into hiring and people and stuff. How you're not the only attorney that I've talked to that's trying to get the firm out of the Stone Ages into the New Ages. And that's got to be really tough. So how do you deal with that? And how do you get in the right people into the firm and then melding with the old people without having them have the bad habits?
Well, I think one of the most difficult things is realizing when you have to say goodbye, and actually say goodbye to a really important key old school player. So my office manager until 2013, not that I remember September 7th, 2013.
That's stuck. It's imprinted. Where's it tattooed on you?
She, at that point, was with the firm almost 30 years.
Whoa.
And she actually taught me a lot, and she was phenomenal, wonderful person, cared so deeply. But I'd come back from an event and be like, okay, we're going to go do this. And I would get, absolutely. And then she'd turn around and do whatever the hell she wanted to do. And it took a while for me to, realize that's what was holding me back. I was like, why isn't this working? And trying all this stuff.
Why do you think she was like that? Why do you think sounds like she was like a cheerleader, but then not do it?
I think it's, partly, I know more than he does. I don't like that. Afraid of change. Yeah. And I think the afraid of change piece is the tough part for those folks that have been with you a long time. Some people are built to change and modify, and other people, they'll change a little bit, but then snap back to the way they were doing things.
Have you watched or listened to my recent episode about toxic employees?
No, but that is on the list.
Because by the way, the YouTube commenters don't like it. Becca asked me if I wanted to delete them. I'm like, no, I like it. Let's keep them on there. But I think it's typically employees that are probably commenting. Yeah. But I was wondering if this particular employee has the traits that I talk about. So I am curious would you go listen to it if it sounds familiar to you at all. Okay. Did she ever tell you how great she was?
She wasn't quite like that. Sometimes there was some that I have gotten that from some people.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of the DISC assessments in the office.
You love DISC, yeah.
And we trend a certain way, and we pull our hair out going, what is it? How are we even attracting people like this? Like, we're just putting a freaking ad out there. How are we, is it the nature of what we do as a business? Maybe it is. So we're now kind of, we have a potential hire now. And I said to Kathy, I said, we like this one person that works for us. They have their own issues, but we like this stuff about them. Let's compare that person to this new person's DISC, because if it's close enough, then we're going to get somebody more like him as opposed to somebody like this other person.
Yeah. We do that other assessment. I can't think of the name of it.
The Minnesota, I don't know.
Whatever the other one is. It's funny. Jim and I have talked about it forever. I always forget it. I always have to ask Amy what it is, but we use it. And I was looking at all the common trends. And it was funny because we were talking about like what you're attracting. We had not been analyzing it from like, okay, like what do they have in common? Like for these different positions, we just hadn't been doing that. Like when it comes to like the numbers, but then I went and looked at it, I was like, wow, these are all matching up. All the ones that were good hires were in this category. All the ones that were bad hires were in this category. It was like, wow. So you really can break it down and like, oh wow, this will work for us, or this won't work for us.
Yeah. One thing we're trying now is we've made some job scorecards, and we're actually building some assessments of what we think is the right employee for that job role. And then we're going to take the potential new hires DISC and compare it to that one.
Yeah, I like that idea.
And the other thing is to use them to compare, like, okay, even if this person is whatever, a C and an S, they're going to be working with this person. Let's see how they actually interact, what the interaction is going to be like, because we need them working with this person.
Do you use the job scorecards in the interview process?
We try to.
Yeah. Like usually when we do bring it up, when we talk about it, the candidates seem to like it because they know what their expectations are.
Yeah.
And that part's really helpful. You also know, like, okay, like what do we want this person to do? Like, and you actually think it through.
Well, that's the thing, is you can't just say, oh, well, we know what they're going to do. Oh, we know what well, no, you don't. I always have this fight with a friend of mine where he always complains about this one employee who comes in late. And I'm like, have you told them they need to be here? They should know.
Then you can't complain about it.
I said, well, they should know, but they don't. So why don't you tell them? Right? If you spell out, and then and this is a stress reliever, right? Now when a person's giving you a hard time, or you're having a hard time with the person, you can say, let's sit down. These are the 5 things you agreed to. You're killing it on numbers 1, 3, and 4. Mm-hmm. What's going on with 2 and 5?
Absolutely.
And it makes the process of trying to help them improve, if you do want to keep them on, so much better. It's like, okay, around this thing, what's the one thing we're going to do?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
this month to work on this thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of benefits to it, and it's especially true with like, and this probably doesn't apply to you with your firm, but there are, if someone is coming in late, it might be because I'll call it the old regime, where maybe there was other leadership in the firm that's like they were okay with you coming in at 9 o'clock when your expectations are 8:30, and that so they may not know.
Yeah, and it's also behavior, right? Our behavior, what we tolerate and don't tolerate. You hear people say, "Oh, if you tolerate the crap, then the A players get upset." And forgetting the labels, if you're tolerating certain things, all the other kids know it.
Right.
Period. I have 4 kids. They can play my wife and I like a fiddle. Right?
Yes.
Right? And so can your employees. Right? They just know. They see what's going on.
When it comes to like changing gears from kind of like the old guard to the new guard, and where you made that switch where you kind of got your financial house in order and all that, was there some triggering factor that said, we've got to do this now? Like, was there some big event that happened that made you make that decision?
So I brought my leadership team to Denver, Colorado in 2018 for a Scaling Up Summit. Vern Harnish's Scaling Up.
You and I both love Scaling Up.
Love Scaling Up. It's the one I picked. I'll just say that there's so many methods and systems out there. Just pick one and go deep.
Yep.
And prior to that, we rented a workspace, and they had these great big glass whiteboard walls. And we had a phenomenal year the year prior, and we were drowning in 2018. And we sat down and we worked with our business coach and tried to really map out what the hell was going on. Who should we let go? Who should we keep? What are we really doing? What are the numbers we're trying to look at? My friend Mike had just now begun getting involved with us in more of this stuff. And I remember mapping this all out, and we came back and we made some tough decisions, and some tough decisions were made for us, and we turned things around. And that was really the pivot point, because it was the team together. It was the first time that my leadership team together, and there were 5 of us, had really made some decisions, talked it out like adults.
Yeah.
And then we followed it up with the summit for the Scaling Up, which kind of just tied stuff together, and it's like really cool. And that was really the pivot point that I can think back on, because that leadership team is still there, and they have grown and matured so much since that time. In fact, one of the individuals had said to me, she goes, "Remember, the wall?" He said, "I know we made certain decisions, and I'm fine with it, but boy, what if we had done that?"
Wow.
And I said to her, I said, "Well, you don't boast often, but you're 100% right."
Yeah.
That was a very interesting
The wall.
There are a lot of walls in my life.
But that is interesting though. Like, but it was definitely it had an impact on her. Have you ever heard me talking about, I don't know if I've mentioned on the podcast, about how Amy and I went through this exercise where we said, if we were going to reduce the firm down to this number, like who would we pick? Have I talked about that?
No, I don't recall you.
It was a very interesting exercise where we were in a position where we had to lay people off, but it was just an interesting thought exercise that I wanted to go through, where I said, okay, let's say that we wanted, because I wanted to say, okay, I think what started this is I wanted to increase our profit percentage is what I was wanting to do. And I was trying to figure out what are ways we can do it. And then I was like, well, what if we did this exercise? We actually did it at a date night where I was like,
wow, okay, you're a hot date.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I said, well, what if we picked, and I don't remember the number, but it was almost like a draft where I said, I'll go first, I said, you can go first. And then so we went back and forth, and we set the number, and we went back and forth, and we saw what was left over. And we're like, oh, interesting. It was very insightful.
So I like the language you just used, because one of my favorite little things to use, and we don't use it enough, is basically a salary cap. We create a little salary cap model.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Right? So, hey, look, here's the max. Here's, the way we did it was like, hey, here's the max revenue, and here's the expenses, and here's this. And what's left over is salary.
Yeah.
And it's very helpful, because I would challenge you not just to do it on the negative side. I spoken to my CFO about this because we've finally gotten our little teams together and we're figuring out profitability and break evens and stuff. Is go the other way. I say to myself, what would it be like if the minimum salary in my firm was $100,000? What if the file clerk's getting $100,000? Right? Let's blue sky it.
Yeah.
What would we need to generate to get our 20% profitability?
Sure.
And whatever. And the only thing you're doing is you're just forget whether it's realistic or not for the moment. You can look in and say, oh my God, if we weren't going to get rid of anybody and we loved everybody we had, in order for me to get to that point, this is the number we would need.
That is, so that's another thought exercise now I have to go through.
Right. Or think about it as like, well, we'll still reduce people, but let's say we're not going to reduce salary or we're doubling everybody's salary, right? You do certain things. I mean, at some point people will get used to a number. But again, if you have specific expectations, right? Precision, a friend of ours always talks about precision, right? Then you can really get to a point where you can do that. You can say, what does this look like if I'm doing it, this way? Why?
Yeah, what I like about this too is a lot of times I'll hear people, sitting in this chair or maybe like in one of the masterminds where like someone talks about the revenue that they want to bring in, but they've not really thought about, okay, how many cases do they actually have to settle, or how many new estate plans do they have to packages do they actually have to do to get to that? And I think if they were to do that, they might realize that number's not really reasonable, or my number's way too low, and I need to be thinking about it at a much higher number. One of
the things we try to break down for the team is when we give them a new revenue number, try to break it down and say, compared to what you did, that's only $12,000 more a week.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
Right? You say to them, $240,000. Like, oh my God, how am I going to do that? Oh, it's $8,000 a week. It's not a big deal.
Another fun one is just to look at your revenues, and then because I just don't care about revenue. Revenues doesn't matter. Profit matters is really what matters. But like going and looking at the revenues and just playing with, okay, what can you do to increase that profit by a certain amount, and like see where your bloat is, because you got to think about how many areas of bloat there are, and you start to look at everything, look at all your financial documents, and think, my profit could go up by this many more hundreds of thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars.
One of the things I work with the CFO is they have their formula for basically a third type, right? Yeah. Maybe 40% in the business we're in, but they break out the profitability side as owner's comp and profit, right? Because we put a lot of things to our business that come out of the business but are really straight to us.
Right, yeah.
Right? But you need to account for that to know how well you really are doing. Trust me, you have, 3 kids? Yeah.
Three kids.
Yeah. So my 4 kids are still on my cell phone plan. So
there'll be chips in a few years, so I don't have to worry about the phone.
Yeah, I'll be paying for that. So, but it's important. It's a phenomenal exercise because it is about profitability. It's like, do we want to just increase revenue 10%, or what if revenue only goes up 5%, but we increase profit by 20%?
Right.
Do we really need this or that? Or, we're talking, how do we get that $100,000 base salary out there? Well, this is what we would really need. In fact, one of the things that we did with the acquisition was we did a break-even analysis and said, okay, once we reach this number plus 15%, then we were going to do a profit share as kind of part of the buyout. But the 15% was I was building in the profit that I want for the firm.
Right.
And I'm more than happy to share the pennies, the dollars after that number. But if we don't reach that number, I don't want to be sharing in, in something. And I've made that mistake in the past. So
I think we've all made that mistake of overpaying or mispaying, where you're paying.
Mispaying.
Yeah, mispaying. I made that up. I definitely don't think that's a word, but where you are, and it's all with good intentions, where your bonus structure is incorrect, your commissions are incorrect, you're just giving away money is what you end up doing.
Yeah.
So this is an exclusive. The kids get to come in. You'll come in and sit down if you want. So we brought the kids with us, and
Very nice.
to this one. They actually get to watch us do the interview at the end of the show. So this is fun. This is fun for me because we wanted to bring them out and let them kind of see what Daddy does with these shows, which is kind of fun.
They're good shows. Even you don't do a family podcast, do you?
Do not.
Oh, he's podcasting again.
Exactly. Yeah. This is a perfect time. All the compliments you gave early on was a perfect time in front of my kids, just about how great the episodes have been. And everything.
Oh my God, the episodes have been phenomenal, especially the ones where you talk about the kids.
It's exactly right. So, if you were to think about the next 5 years for the disability guys,
Yep.
Okay, what word would you use for what your plans are for the disability guys? One word.
It's 3 words.
You gotta give me one. You can give me the 3, but give me the
I'll
one.
give it to you as a acronym, BPG.
Okay.
Beneficial, profitable growth.
Okay.
That is our driving strategy. We are going to have profitable growth. We're going to have growth. It's going to be profitable, but it has to be beneficial. And that is benefiting the community, benefiting ourselves, benefiting what we do and who we do things for, because there's a lot of ways to make money, but there's some ways that are not as nice as others. Just internally, we used to represent uninsured employers for years. All right.
Oh, that sounds awful.
And it was awful because I would say 1 out of 10 were really deserving of good representation because they just screwed up. The other 9 were horrible. Like, I hated it. And I said, you know what? It's not worth the money, even though it was cash up front.
Right.
It's not worth the money. And it has to be beneficial to what we do in terms of helping people. So the disability guys, we are the choice for all disability and injury legal needs. And that's our focus.
Do you ever have any intentions to make it a national firm?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me more about that.
We're trying to figure out the model. At first, the model was maybe some type of franchise model, but really it's going to be more of probably a regional growth and then a national growth. I do have a vision in 5 years to be sponsoring at least a sports team somewhere. We are leaning heavily towards Paralympics and some disability related because we are the disability guys after all.
Smart idea. It's a brilliant idea.
So we're working on that. In fact, I am a golfer, so we're actually getting involved with the Metropolitan Golf Association this year for their adaptive golf. But I'm also really into, for some reason, I'm just like obsessed with like para biking.
Yeah.
So I have a couple leads in over there, and just it fits with who we are. We love being involved in the community, but that's a little bit of the ego. But I would love to go to a stadium or an arena or something, and the disability guys are sponsoring the event, and not just because I want my name up there, but I think I can see that as a brand.
Right. I mean, the moment I heard that name, I instantly loved it. It is a catchy name, and then you add the cute little Ted, on the Ted, yeah, on the logo, and it is memorable. I like it. Who came up with Ted?
We had hired we had gone through morphed through some different logos, and one of them it was kind of a cartoon of me with helping with some people. Again, it was so expensive to put it onto shirts, and we hired a company that we liked the work that they did, and they gave us a whole bunch of different things, and we actually had people vote on it in the office, and then we ended up with Ted.
I like it. Well, who designed it, I guess? So it's that company that put it together for you? I got you.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last thing I want to ask you about, then we'll wrap, is so you want to get this thing to a national firm. What's the one thing over the next so many years before you get to that point that you need to focus on to make sure that happens?
People.
Say more.
It's really about clarity, alignment, and focus. And we're getting our message clear. We're getting people aligned. We're getting our focus there, but you need the people to execute. Part of my succession planning for the future, I do vision my son coming into the business. Depending on what happens with non-attorney ownership affects some stuff as well. But getting the right people that have the energy and the drive and to want to make this happen. I vision myself as the board, the chairman of the board, right, coming in, chill, meeting with them. What do you guys? It's interesting, right? You hear a lot, and you've spoken about on your podcast before about, you have to be a CEO, act like nobody knows what a CEO is or how to act like it or whatever it might be, in terms of how we're educated,
right?
And one thing that's missing from all that is one of the CEO's jobs, aside from being the face of the company and driving the strategy and making sure things and resources are in places, they're also the liaison with the board of directors. We don't have a board of directors.
100%, right.
So I see myself as being part of a board of directors for this enterprise. And I can see my son, I can see some other people there and coming in, making sure they get what they need or pushing them a bit more and doing it a lot sooner than what it took me to learn.
Does this mean that PI is in the future for the firm?
It is not off the table. I definitely, and in the right way too. It's like I've been around enough really intelligent and smart and successful people, talking about your dad, and others, and I can absolutely see that as a piece of the puzzle, especially if I like the idea of a niche focused, and then referring a lot out,
right?
Just as a general business,
yeah. It is kind of nice. Yeah, that part is the firms that do that. I think it's a cool concept. Yeah. I think it's kind of hard. I wouldn't say it's hard to pull off. It's just it's not something I would.
It takes a different skill set than running a
100%. Yeah.
Practice.
All right, Brian. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
I loved having you as the last guest. I told you that before, just because you bring an energy to it, and it was a great ending on this note. So I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you.